Hello guys, my name is David. Welcome to another video. How are you doing today? How's your day going? Having a good day so far? Thanks a lot for tuning in today. And welcome to my studio. This is usually how I work, so it looks like that. Got my little setup here. Got my Omamori here for good luck while coding. What do you think about it? Today is going to be a little bit different than usual because we're talking about the beautiful world of agentic engineering. I'm currently trying this new thing to not overwork myself called creative days. These are days during the week where I don't code at all and only focus on creative things, for example, YouTube videos or other content. And today is one of those creative days. So 14 months ago, I quit my job to focus on indie hacking. Indie hacking means I try to focus more on smaller application and services and try to get ideas quickly on the market, see if the ideas work, iterate on them, and then either throw them away or maybe focus on them. Because of that, I often need to work on a lot of projects at the same time. And for that, I built an agentic flow that I think works really well and I want to tell you a little bit about. I'm currently calling this flow the 4 personas because I'm using 4 different AI personas to work on my stuff, but the name, I think we can come up with something better, right? So let's start the journey with persona number 1 and maybe the most important one out of this entire flow, which is the architect. The architect persona is the thing that turns my ideas and the things I have into my head into technical design docs. So I'm giving it a feature or a task description and it turns that into something that maybe later can be acted on by other agents. The job of this agent is to do all the heavy lifting, so read my entire code base, understand everything that I want to do, and then create a document out of that. So the job of this persona is to create technical design docs. I can show you quickly how that looks like. This is a project here I'm working on called Fix My Japanese. It's a website that automatically corrects your Japanese grammar and tells you your mistakes. So on the side, I have this plans folder and all of my design docs are in here. For example, we have this one here for the stats page. How I'm thinking about design docs is it needs to condense all of the information that you need to know to work on something into one document. A very simple sniff test is if I give this design doc to a junior engineer, would this engineer that maybe just onboarded be able to implement this? If the answer is yes, then it's a good design doc. If the answer is a no, then yeah, maybe we need to iterate on it a bit more. I'm also trying to think about context optimization. So I want to make sure that all of the starting points that an agent needs to know are in this document. For example, here we have an implementation plan that says update the corrections context, add a new function to this file here. Maybe we call it this way or that way. And then in the second step, we have create the stats live page, which looks like this. And we have a few UI components in here. Okay? Why we structure it like this is because we're directly giving the agent the files that it needs to look at. It doesn't need to do lookups anymore because each lookup is going to read a lot of things into its context. But if the agent already sees here, oh, I need to read these files, then it directly knows, okay, I need to read this specific file. I don't need to start loading in different files, which is going to add tokens to the context. And then we're starting to deal with things like context pollution or maybe also context overloads. We also have the explanation of what needs to be implemented. Here in this case, it's the goal is add a new stats page to provide users with insights into their Japanese usage and common mistakes. We have the features, which is the correction type distribution and the drill down view, the implementation plan that I just mentioned, but then also some other things like, oh, these are the database queries we want to use, or here's some UI structure. How I'm creating these documents is completely tool independent. It doesn't matter if I'm using Open Code or Codex or Gemini. I have all of them open here, right? So we have Open Code here, we have Codex here, we have Gemini. In Open Code, I already created a new persona. I can quickly tap into it and then now we're in architect mode. You can see that here. So and then I can give it the instructions. For example, investigate the following. We want to extend the stats page with more information about blah, blah, blah. In Codex, I can do the same, but because Codex doesn't have sub-agents yet, I implemented it as a command. So I can say architect, it's loading in my entire prompt. And then once it started processing that, it's going to ask me what we actually want to implement. Here, I'm in planning mode. I will not make any code changes. What features would you like to design? Gemini does have sub-agents, so I can say invoke the architect agent with this information, blah, 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 blah. And then it would also do exactly the same thing. And once the agents are done with like their investigation, they will generate those plan documents, and then I take it from there. Because these agents are only creating plan documents, I can do a lot of that at the same time. I'm usually not only generating one. I have like maybe 4 or 5 of these architect agents all working at the same time, all doing research and all generating these plan documents. Once the plan is done, I of course review it in detail. I want to make sure that the thing that the agent suggested is matching with the architecture that I have in my head. I want to be very sure that everything I'm doing is matching the architecture that I have in mind for a certain project. This is very important to make sure that everything is following a coherent architecture. If we give an agent too much freedom, then it will just do what it wants, and at some point, like, the code base starts becoming unmaintainable. But another thing I'm also doing with those plans is I ask another high thinking model to review it. For example, I could have Codex here, and I can just ask it, review the plan at stats page, right? The agent will then review the plan and then come up with suggestions and improvements to see, does everything match? Did we maybe forget something? But one thing I always make sure is that I'm using a different model than the model that created the initial plan. So for example, if the plan is created with Gemini, I want to make sure that the review happens with Codex. If Codex created a plan, I want to make sure that the review happens with Gemini. So I don't have like model bias in here. I want to make sure that I'm covering different things with different models. I think most of my time spent during the day is happening in this phase. I'm reviewing a lot of design docs, I give feedback, I make small changes here and there, and I want to make sure that all the design docs that are approved match with the architecture that I have in my head. So this is absolutely not a one-shot thing where I'm asking an agent to create a document and then that's done. No, usually we have a lot of iterations on it. There's a lot of reviewing, a lot of changes, a lot of small things that we need to adjust here and there to make it perfect. And now we come to the second phase, which is the implementer. Maybe the most boring phase, but also like the phase where all of the magic happens, because that's where the design doc is actually getting implemented. The implementer is very simple because it just follows the plan that we already created. And because we created the plan very detailed, it doesn't really matter which agent or which model is eventually implementing it. For example, let's go back to the add stats page here. So what we want to do is already pretty much outlined here, right? We know that we want to add a new function to corrections, and we know that we want to create a new stats live page. All the agent has to do is follow that plan. So because of that, it doesn't really matter where I implement it, right? I can go, for example, go into a new Gemini session, I can say implement stats page, and then it would just go ahead and implement that plan. But I could also give this plan, for example, to my agent that's running on a server, or I can give it to Jules, I can give it to Codex, I can give it to Copilot Cloud. It just depends on like what I currently have available, what do I currently have in limit, where do I still have tokens, and I just give it to that agent. For example, if I want to give this plan to Jules, I can just cat the plan out and I can pipe it here into Jules remote new with my repo attached, and once I execute this, it would just delegate that plan to Jules. But again, it doesn't really matter where I implement it. This specific plan here about thinking mode version 2, I gave to Jules. We can see here on the left side, the design doc that I gave in. It's exactly in the format that we already described. And then Jules followed the plan and implemented it on the right. But the same thing we can also do in Codex. Here I gave a different design doc about multi-call connector implementation to Codex. It's again a design doc that Gemini created. And Codex just implemented it. And that's it. This is also why I'm saying the implementer phase is probably the most boring one, because it's also just following a plan step by step. Now, okay, we're finished with implementation. You want to guess what comes next? Well, if you guessed code review, then of course you're correct. The third persona are the critics, but that's just a fancy word of saying code reviewers. So let's get into it. Automatically on all my repositories, when a new pull request gets created, 2 agents are reviewing the code. The first one is Gemini, the second one is Codex. For bigger changes that I'm a little bit more unsure about, I'm also adding Copilot in the mix, but usually Gemini and Codex are enough. On this pull request here, which is add thinking mode version 2 to fix my Japanese, we can see that Gemini started reviewing the code first. It gave us a feedback here, it gave us some code changes that it's maybe not so happy about. And then we have Codex jumping in and also giving its own feedback. Sometimes that's the same feedback, sometimes that's different feedback. That's just the nature of things. So already, automatically, I already have 2 sets of eyes. I don't know, do agents have eyes? I have 2 reviews on each pull request. And then of course we have a third one, which is the one from me. But of course we don't need to use Cloud at all. In open code, we can just say review, which then calls my review agent. Or in Codex, we can just say /review, which prompts of like what kind of review it should do. Structuring it in this way and having review be its own agent means that, for example, our implementing agent could call the review agent. Review agent is giving some feedback, and then implementing agent goes ahead and then fixes that feedback. I want to emphasize here that for all of my projects and services, I never ever merge something only because Gemini and Codex reviewed it and said it's okay, right? I always have my own review phase on top of that. And I think if you don't do that, you will run into problems later on. Don't skip on code review, okay? But I don't want to get ahead of myself because we have one more persona to cover, and that is persona number 4, which I call the fixer. And the fixer does, well, it fixes things. It takes the feedback that we get from the review agents, for example, here the Gemini or the Codex feedback, and it fixes those. How I implemented that in different tools looks something like that. In open code, I have a / command. I can say fix a GitHub review. But it works something like that. I'm telling the agent to use the GitHub command line tool to basically find the current pull request. Whoopsie, I did not want to open that. To find the current pull request and then find all of the review feedback that we received so far. But because this is something that we need GraphQL for, I'm also giving the agent the full GraphQL query here that it can use to find those review feedback, okay? In the last step, I'm telling the agent to ask me whether we should fix those issues. And then after fixing, mark each fixed comment as resolved using the following command as another GraphQL query that mutates it. So what this agent is doing is it's reading all of these review feedback comments here. All of these like 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 different feedback comments that we received. It investigates, it asks me, should we fix those? And if I say yes, it will fix it. It will create a new commit, and then it will actually mark these conversations as resolved. So the same as me clicking this button here. In Codex, I have the same thing, but I have 2 variations on it. The first one is a prompt. For example, I can say prompts fix GitHub review, which again inserts the same prompt that we just saw earlier. And then I have a $ command, which is doing the same thing. So I have like dollar GitHub address review comments, which is then doing exactly the same thing. But what I could also do is, because for example, this pull request here is created by Jules, I can go into the different feedback comments and I could say at Jules, fix this. And then it would do the same thing. Jules would reiterate on the pull request and then fix the comments. So you can see we already have a loop here, right? We have on one side agents creating review comments. On the other side, we have other agents taking those review comments and then fixing them. That can happen like 2, 3, 4 times. And then hopefully by the end of it, we have most bigger problems resolved. And the pull request is in a state where it's ready for me to be reviewed. Then another thing we could do if we really wanted to is we could tell the agent that after it implemented and committed everything, it could just re-request a review. And by how we do that is we just call Gemini review, Codex review. And if I submit this now, then Gemini and Codex will re-review the code changes with the new commit. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so my camera overheated on me. It's actually a new day. I had to set up everything again. And so if things look a little bit different, you know why. By the end of all of this, we have code that has been architected by our architect, implemented by our implementers, and it has gone through multiple review phases by different agents and then by us. Hopefully, by the end of all of this, we have code that is now ready to be merged. Structuring our work in these kind of personas means that everything is highly parallelizable. We can focus really on the things that need our time the most, which is of course the architect and the review phases. We're taking less the role of a coder and more of an orchestrator that just pulls everything and keeping everything together. Kind of like a technical product manager. Like we're thinking about the specs, we're giving it to an engineer to turn into a design doc. We're taking the design doc, we review it, we give it to an engineer. Then we take the code, we review it again, and then we decide, okay, is this acceptable or not? Does it fit like the things we wanted to do? Does it fit the architecture we have in our head? And if yes, then we merge it. We already have multiple passes on the architect and the review phases, but we can also have multiple passes on the implementation phase. For example, we can take the same design doc and just give it to different agents and then just pick the implementation that we like the most. Some tools like Codex, for example, allow you to do this right away. If we have here our description of a task, we can say implement this blah, blah, blah. We have this little drop down here where we can say we want multiple versions of the same thing. So if I click on 4 here, we will have 4 Codex agents at the same time implementing the same design doc and all coming up with an implementation that we can then review and decide which one is the best. So this is currently how I work with AI almost every day. I think this flow works really well for me with the tools that we have available right now, but we can also adapt as things get better. For example, if a better thinking model comes out, we can just use that for the architect phase and then create better design docs. Or if a faster, better coding model comes out that maybe reduces the time in implementation from 10 minutes to maybe 2 minutes, we can just upgrade that phase to that model. So that's why I like to keep things small and modular so that I can add modules to this pipeline. I can take them out if they're no longer necessary, and I can also upgrade independently. But we're also still very early on this, right? Maybe tomorrow we suddenly get a model that is much better in all of this. It creates a plan for us, it implements it, it calls review agents and acts on the review, and suddenly the entire thing is perfect. We just don't know how things are going to change. But for now, with the tools we have available, I think this flow is pretty good. This was my first attempt at a more technical topic. Is this something you like to see more of? Please let me know in the comments below. If you have some feedback about this flow, maybe some things you would change or maybe do differently. Also let me know in the comments below. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. And I see you hopefully in the next video. Bye bye.